Everyone, welcome back to our final workshop, part 2, activities to integrate workplace skills in the language curriculum, brought to you by Dr. Susana Perez Castillejo. This is part of our extempore 2022 PD Extravaganza. Welcome to everybody who has attended so far. All of the previous recordings of our workshops and webinars are already uploaded to our YouTube channel, as will be this part 2 of this workshop. And without further ado, I will toss it off to Susana and we can get started.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I know it's difficult on a Friday afternoon. Well, depending on where you are, I saw someone is in France. Nice. I am sharing in the chat. I am sharing right now, enter the link to this presentation, the slideshow. Okay, so you have the link there. And I'm sure Grant will share it again for those who join later. But as you follow along, if you want to check, some slide that I passed already, you can follow that through that link. Also, remember that there are links within the presentation, and they don't work if you open the presentation in edit mode. Okay, you will need to open the presentation as a slideshow in presentation mode, and then the links will work. The links are for activities, okay, that I'm showing you, like the sample activities. So you get those resources there. All right, let's get started. So I'm gonna get started with the goals again, reminding everybody about the goals of this presentation. We are identifying workplace skills that the language curriculum that we are already doing in our classes, okay, but we are not very explicit about it. We are discussing, we did that yesterday, the role of career education, not just within the liberal arts in general, but the language curriculum. And as we do that, I have some activities so that you can engage with each other, okay? People who are interested in the same things that you are. And I'm giving you many activities. That is something that we're gonna go and do again today, okay, right away. And creating, modifying things that we probably are already doing, the typical activities that we are already doing. Also, I will give you today more resources to further explore this topic. And I will talk about how when our curriculum is very rigid, when we have a particular textbook that everybody has to use, and people in Spanish 2 count on the people of Spanish 1 or French 1 to cover specific things. So how do we do when that is the case? Okay, how do we do this? So let's start with a brief review of yesterday for those of you who were unable to attend, and then I will give you more activities. We'll talk about resources, and also when we talk about curricular rigidity, I will do that too by giving you sample activities, okay, that work with the typical curriculum for year 1 and year 2, not language specific, okay? We'll do that at the end. And yesterday, we talked about workplace skills, and remember that those are the competencies that we usually need to access and obtain employment opportunities, okay? And these are competencies and not just obtain, but also keep and advance, okay, in that career. And these are skills that apply in multiple settings, and we can integrate them into the curriculum. And there is actually a push right now for integrating those in the humanities in general, okay, because of economic and social equity concerns. And this is an opportunity for us to increase the relevance of our courses for the more unmotivated students, okay, especially in courses that are required, that students are taking for a requirement. And then it can challenge a little bit the traditional language department, where we see, there's language teaching, there's literature, there's linguistics, and then there's a language for the professions, okay? If that exists, okay? In this case, what I'm talking about is a model that integrates employability skills, workplace skills across the curriculum, all right? So the activities that you can see, and I'm sure the link to the first PowerPoint, the PowerPoint from yesterday, that's going to be stored somewhere, right, Grant? and the video as well. And the activities were, we talked about behavioral interviews, okay, and how to integrate those in the classroom, selfies, an activity with selfies and deciding whether those were professional or unprofessional. Then I showed an activity using business cards for the novice learners, and then email conventions, and that's where those were for more advanced learners. And then we ended with an activity working on how to create an activity around cultural differences in meeting agendas, okay? Today, I'm gonna keep talking about, I'm gonna keep giving you sample activities. And first, I wanted to tell you that I'm dividing activities the way I see this into two categories. There are activities that address employability skills as a goal. Okay, that's part of what they do. Okay, this is, for example, when we specifically address a skill, a communication skill like email or interviewing, okay, or creating a meeting agenda, or a skill like giving a pitch, right? A personal statement or personal representation. Okay, how do we behave? What do we look like when we want to show our professional self, right? And then there are activities that use employability or career readiness as a topic. And this is a way to contextualize language instruction. And this is something that we can do when we're outside of the units that target specifically the professions, okay? And we can use that to practice, you know, any relevant language feature that we're working with. And I'll give you today a few examples of that, okay? We can use infographics on employment data when we're discussing numbers, okay? We want them to practice numbers for whatever reason, okay? Or articles and videos on career topics. And I will give you a list of career topics that are very interesting for high school and college students at least, okay? And I think for others too, for younger learners, some of these topics will also be interesting and spark conversations, okay? So before we move on, before I start giving you more activities, we're gonna start with job interviews. Are there any questions so far? So if there are no questions, I will just
I think we're good, Susanna.
Okay, let's keep moving. So job interviews, okay? And I'm going to give you 3 activities here, okay? The typical language culture skills that can be practiced with job interviews. The number 1 is interpersonal communication, okay? That's part of what we do, that's essential, and that's what job interviewing is about. And the linguistic focus can vary, okay? And I'll show you one of the examples does not happen during the lesson on professions, okay? So it doesn't have to be limited to that chapter. And that's what I'm trying to do with this whole workshop, showing you that career skills don't have to be, career education doesn't have to be just part of that lesson that covers the professions in your curriculum. The workplace skills that we can address with this can be self-presentation, okay? What you look like, sound like, how you behave in this particular type of interaction. Communicating with different audiences, okay, how that would vary. And then preparing for predictable interactions. A job interview is a very set type of communication, and because of that, we can prepare for it, okay? And I'll show you that in a second. We are going to be showing the examples, but first some notes about it. Predictable interactions, as I said, can be scripted for preparation, okay? So in this type of activity, when I do this job interview, I do give time for students to practice and script and or discuss or collaboratively look for words, okay, that they can be using, because that is real. That's what we do when we know that we should do. When we know we have a job interview, we sort of run the script through our head a little bit. What if they ask this or that? Because it is predictable. There are certain things that we know they're going to ask, okay? Then both speaking and listening are important. So we should be doing this in our classes, okay? Even outside of the proficiency unit, right? And the task formats, as I said, can be recycled throughout the course. I'll show you right away, okay? So these are the 3 examples, and these links, okay, that you see in the presentation take you to 3 handouts for 3 different, it's sort of the same type of activity, but at 3 different levels, okay? And again, the link to these presentation, to this slide is in the chat. And if you want these links inside the presentation to work, you should open it as a slideshow, okay, not in editing mode. I will close this for a moment and then show you. Let's start with the upper level course, okay? So for upper level course, which one is it? Okay, so this is the handout. We have the link there. The goal here is to provide or ask for relevant information in a formal setting, okay, job interview. Because this is for an upper level, my students already have more resources and can take on more of the preparation, okay? You will see in the other examples that I do more of that. So finding a job posting to start with, okay? A job posting from a target language source. Ideally, it should be a job that your students would be interested in. This can be something that you do, or if your students are more advanced, then they can do it, okay? That can be part of the preparation for this activity. For Spanish, I wrote this one, okay, for you. I'm sure you have other ideas for other target languages. Then you can brainstorm with them some vocabulary for skills and qualifications, okay, related to the job posting. And these, because these are upper level students, these should be relatively fast, okay? They should already, this is reviewing their vocabulary. And then brainstorming with them what type of information is usually provided or asked for in a job interview, okay? They may not have experience with this, but you can give them options. Will they ask you about your favorite ice cream? Probably not. Will they ask you about experiences from your previous job? Yeah, probably. So you can help them there depending on the maturity of your students and their life's experiences, what you think they have experienced. Also, something that I do is give extra input with YouTube videos. Okay, there are many YouTubers there helping people, you know, how to effectively answer these type of questions in an interview. How do you do this? How do you prepare for an interview? For Spanish, I have this resource here, is a headhunter, and he's fun. He does fun videos. A text resource is this one, okay, which is the career orientation, career development site for a university in Colombia. And the task, okay, in itself, in my class, it follows the speed dating format, okay? The inside and outside circles also work. And what that is students sit in rows, okay? So there are pairs of students, okay? And then one of the rows, I tell them that they're going to be rotating, moving, okay? One seat over, okay? When I clap my hands. So they're talking to one partner, the person that sits across, and when they're done with whatever task they're doing, I clap my hands and I say, okay, this row rotates, okay? So everybody gets a new partner and they have to do the same task. So that's the same as inside, outside circles. It depends on what kind of classroom you have, the size and the furniture, okay? So everybody in this activity, I have everybody perform 2 roles, okay? The interviewer and the candidate. And I signal when everybody is supposed to be which person, okay? And the interview questions that they prepare are this, the typical, tell me about yourself. And it can be, I chose to word it like this, it could be something else. My choice comes from these videos from this headhunter, okay? I was using him as an example, and then I decided to use the same wording, the same phrasing, okay? You could use another one, but this is very typical. Tell me about yourself, or what is your main weakness, when they tell you to talk about weaknesses and strengths. And in the YouTube video, the person actually gives advice on how to answer that you shouldn't say a weakness. You actually, they want to see how you overcome that Okay, what are the behaviors that show your attitude towards learning, right? And why should I hire you? Okay, how do you sell yourself? And I also tell them to add, if they can, 2 or 3 other questions. And this again depends on the maturity of your students. If they don't have any experience with job interviews, then you're done, okay, with those 3 questions. And in my class, I do give them time to prepare. We spend the whole time, okay, with this type of activity. They have time to prepare. How would they answer these questions, okay, if they were the candidates? And then we perform the activity. 15 minutes or so. It goes fast because they're upper level students, but we dedicate a large chunk of time, and everybody is going to be the candidate at one point. So everybody has to practice how they would answer this. And as a follow-up, once they're done, okay, interviewing in a classroom, typical classroom for me is like 100 minutes, okay? A class session, I would say they interview like 4 or 5 different students, okay? And as a follow-up, we would do some debriefing, okay? So would you answer the questions in the same way after you've gone through that for a few times, a few rounds? What would you do differently? Did you hear something that you really liked from one of your classmates? And they really like this activity because these are college students and they're already in their junior year, some are seniors, and they may not have had the chance to actually think about, oh, if I was in an interview, how would I prepare? Okay, and suddenly they're doing that in the Spanish classroom. So that's for upper level. Any questions about it before I show different levels? All right, if we're good, I'm gonna show you another example, and this is for a second semester class. And I took this, I hadn't done it in the second semester, and then I saw this actual presentation last year, and I decided I'm going to do this, okay? It doesn't have to be only for upper level. And here the same goal, provide or ask for relevant information in a formal setting, but I give them more of the materials, okay? And I adapted them from this presentation. The materials are here, also in the same handout, okay? This is the job description, okay? And the information that the interviewer needs to get from the candidate, okay? This is for the person playing the candidate role. This is a role play activity. And this is who you are, okay? And this is the information they need to gather, okay? So this activity is about providing information and gathering information, okay? I just saw a question in the chat, okay, from Manon. I'm wondering how you assess the students through those job interview activities or at the end of the course. That is a very good question. For this that I'm showing right now, second semester, these presenters, they said that this was an assessment for them, okay? They gave these as homework to prepare, okay? The information about the job and the information that the interviewer needed to get from the candidate, and the same for the candidate role. And they asked students to prepare at home. And then in the classroom, without notes, they had to perform this role play. And that was part of their oral grade for the semester. In my case, when I've done this and when I do the upper level interview, I do not assess that particular one, okay, the practice that they do in the classroom. What I assess is as homework, okay, I give them, this is actually an extempore assignment. I do it with extempore. I give them sample questions that they have practiced in the classroom, and with timers and everything, they have to tell me how would they respond. And that's when I listen to each of them individually, okay, and I can give individual feedback. And it counts for me, that grade that I obtained from homework or speaking homework that they do in extempore. For me, that's a grade that goes towards oral homework. It's not like the final exam or anything. They have prepared and they've done it. And now I'm seeing what I'm listening to their production individually, and I can provide more individual feedback than when they do it in the classroom and they're all talking at the same time. Okay, I hope that answers your question. So going back to the second semester, so the teacher gives that information, the au pair job information, and then the candidate role, and the task again as a speed dating format or inside and outside circles. Students perform the role play. Okay, if like these presenters did, if they asked students to prepare at home, then they said no. No scripts, no notes, nothing. If you don't give them time to do it at home, then I would recommend to, that you let students have these in front of them, okay? Because these are second semester students, they're not going to have that ability to have that language ready, okay? So that's an example. In both cases, this happens after students have already learned vocabulary related to professions, to job skills, things like that. I'm going to show you a third example. Let me go back here. This one, lion tamer example. And this is something that I don't do during the unit on professions. In fact, I do it before, so students haven't learned that. And I did not create this activity. Let me go to the handout. This is adapted from an activity that one of my professors, Frances Matos-Schultz, she works at the University of Minnesota, and I was very fortunate when I was there to have her. She coordinated the intensive first and second semester course combined, and I taught that as a TA, and she was the supervisor back then, and so I adapted it and I used that activity a lot, but credit for her. So students, the input comes from this PowerPoint. Okay, you have the link there, and I'm going to show that PowerPoint here. It's in Spanish, but I will translate as I go. Okay, so you see it as a model. So this is a story, Homer Simpson. Okay, just because it's a character that everybody knows, but you could change the character and make it into something more authentic from the target culture. But that wasn't, I was not doing culture teaching, okay? Here, I was just doing actually the past tense. So Homer is su trabajo, so Homer and his job. Homer works in a nuclear plant, and I give them the story. I'm not gonna do everything because it might take too long, but different things about him. This happens in a third semester course. Okay, so you know the level of the students more or less. Okay, third semester course at the beginning. Okay, when we're reviewing the past tense. And he's very helpful with his boss, and he understands a lot about his job, and he likes to sleep. So one day he fell asleep. Okay, then we start with the past tense, and I'm giving them input in written, and then I'm talking and I'm saying things, okay, as I go about the picture and ask questions, you know, the typical input session within a class. And then his boss called him to the office, and now he doesn't have a job. You're fired. He fired him. Oh my God. He doesn't have a job now. What's he gonna do? And then we start talking about he's so depressed. My life has no sense, and all these pictures that I took from Google. So he started looking for a job, and he's like, oh, he went to NASA, okay, but he did not get the job, and this gets repetitive, okay. So they get this what's called which is the past tense, right? He didn't get it. Then as a superhero, he didn't get it. This is kind of silly because students have not learned the vocabulary for professions. Okay, so I wanted something that they could see quickly, right? And understand. He also tried at the bar of his friend, and he didn't get the job, even though they were friends, okay? So he was desperate, oh my God. And then Marge told him, there's a circus coming to Springfield, and they need a lion tamer. Okay, obviously they need to learn this word, okay, but it's easy, okay, to learn. And they see the image, they have never learned that word in Spanish, and I guess in any other target language we don't use that, but they need this person. So he's going to apply for this job, and we talk about what type of questions, what type of abilities that a lion tamer need, and half the class is going to be Homer and the other class will be the interviewer. And this is the handout. Okay, so if you are Homer, before the interview, you're going to prepare 5 questions that you have about the circus and about the person who had the position before. Okay, and I have them do this collaboratively, okay, with other students, and they're going to use the past tense. All right, so this is just contextualization, okay, for the past tense. And after the interview, we'll see that in a second. So if you are going to be the circus director before the interview, okay, you're going to write 5 questions to learn more about the past experience of each of the candidates. Okay, so use the past tense. So they do these, okay, they ask each other the questions and they do their best to answer, okay. They don't know, as I said, all the vocabulary for job skills, but they don't really need it for this activity. And at the end, they get together in smaller groups, like a group. They're usually like 2 groups of Homers and 2 groups of circus directors, and they decide which circus would you like to work for and why. Okay, oh, because that director was very cool. He asked this question and not another, and which Homer, okay, you would like to hire. So that's an example of how you could use the job interview format for an activity that is not related to professions at all. Okay, it doesn't happen in your unit about professions. It doesn't have to happen. In this case, it's the past tense, because that's a linguistic feature that comes up in job interviews. They will ask you about your past experiences. Okay, so that's what I have for the job interview. Are there any questions before I move on to the next sample activity? All right, if we are good to go, then I'll move on. And the next part, so here, this is a type of activity where we're targeting language feature in particular, and then a particular type of skill, which is asking questions during an interview. Now, this type of activity is where career readiness is a pretext. It's something that helps us contextualize language instruction. Okay, so we're doing reading comprehension specifically here. And again, the linguistic focus can vary. I will show you an example of how I use this for commands. Okay, and the workplace skills, there isn't a specific skill. What we're doing here is using career readiness workplace skills as the content for the reading comprehension to happen. Okay, and in this case, as a way to practice the commands, or in my case. Okay, so if you click on that sample reading, it will take you to, let me close this handout. Where is it? Okay, here. This is something that I took from the internet. It's in Spanish. Again, it's the language that I teach, but I will show you a number of topics that are very interesting and that you can find sources, okay, to use. So in this case, it was a how-to. Okay, you can find many how-to, like tips on this or that. Okay, in this one is how to show self-confidence, okay, during a job interview online. Okay, so that's very like modern, like very contemporary, right? So I used it for contextualization of comments, and this is again in the 3rd semester class. And the students are not going to understand 100% of these texts. That's okay. We read it together. I model some of the things that it says because it is commands. So this is a command. This is another command. And it talks about body language. So it's very easy to do this reading comprehension with the students. And then we use it in different ways. I tell them to identify the commands. Okay, identify, in this case, the command has a pronoun, and I tell them, you know, what have you learned about this pronoun? What is it doing after and not before? And what do you know? So they talk about it a little bit. It's metalinguistic work that they're doing with this text. And then I tell them the follow-up to this when we discuss this is, okay, so this is all in informal commands in Spanish, okay, more familiar commands. In a more formal situation, if you wanted to give this as advice to someone you don't know and you want to be very formal, how would your grammar change? Okay, and that's what they need to do. Okay, transform this into a list of bullet points where they're being more formal. Okay, that's a task that they do. Okay, transforming this into that. But we're doing this reading and we're using as a contextualization job interviewing. This case, okay. And I also, because my course has that, they know, okay. I tell them that I'm working with the career development office and that I'm integrating intentionally all these career skills, and that's why in my class they're not surprised, okay, to be using job interviews and these types of activities as contextualization for something else like commands. So are there any questions about that before we move on to the next segment? All right, so for next, what I have for you is actually a group activity, okay, small group activity. And we're going to divide you, okay, in groups. And I'm going to give you, first I'll play it for everybody, a social media screening video. Social media screening is a practice that I didn't have to go through that back in my time. That wasn't a thing, but now it is, okay? So our students pretty much either they have experienced this or they will, okay? And I'll tell you in a second. So we're going to use that video as a pretext, as a way to contextualize language instruction, okay? When workplace skills are not the goal, the learning goal, but the context, okay? The conversation topic, let's say. And I'm going to give you some directions, and then your task is in pairs or groups, depending on how Grant divides people. You will discuss how you could use this video to create an activity that targets language and culture learning goals. So before we split into breakout rooms, let me show the video for everybody, okay? And you have the link there, but I'll just show it for everybody. Let me make sure that I'm sharing the sound from my computer. Okay, it's very short, and this one is in English. In the activity directions, I give an example for an authentic resource in Spanish, and these are very easy to find in the target language, okay?
Employers check your social media during the hiring process.
Just checking, can you hear it? Okay.
Throughout the hiring process, you're likely to take assessments such as ability tests, games, exercises, and interviews. But did you know there is a hidden layer of the screening process that you need to be aware of? It is a fact that employers look at your social media platforms, whether this be Facebook or LinkedIn. According to a Career Builder survey, it has been estimated that up to 70% of employers check applicants' social media during the hiring process. While this is not 100%, it is best practice to ensure that your social media does not present anything that could deter the employer. Importantly, you don't have to totally wipe your social media accounts, but do bear past and present social media posts in mind when applying to jobs. For more on employer application processes, subscribe now and get first-hand tips on passing your job tests first time.
All right. So this topic is relevant for our students from the moment they're using social media. And that's now middle school, okay? Although I know some 10-year-olds that are already doing that. Scary, right? Because I have a 9-year-old, so it's like, I'm not looking forward to that. So from the moment they become social media users, they should be interested in this type of topic. Okay, because the image that you portray through social media will follow you. Okay, it does follow you across different contexts. Okay, so it is important to have these conversations, not just for job related or job search related conversations, but for other things, right? So if you click on activity directions, it will take you to, okay, here it is. This is what I want you to do when you are in breakout rooms, okay? The goals will be to use authentic workplace related content to practice something, okay? And we're working on this goal that I have for the workshop, creating modifying activities. Okay, so the background, we talked about that already. Okay, recruiters are using this because they're looking for red flags, okay, attitudes. But there are some people who oppose this, and they say that, well, social media screening can lead to discrimination, okay, when hiring. And there are risks that puts the company in a really bad situation, right? If that happens. So you're using this video, okay, in English, but imagine that you're using something else in your target language and discuss in your groups these questions, okay, based on this question. How could you create an activity, okay, on social media screening? This is again the link of the video, the same video that I just showed. You could, if you are already doing this, you could share it in your groups. This one that I use for Spanish, okay, is by Milton Navarro. He is a very popular YouTuber from Mexico, and he has very good videos on different career-related topics. And, you know, what are the types of activities that would fit well with this topic? What learning goals you could address? What proficiency levels would this activity be more appropriate for? Besides the video, what other things you could use, and could you have students search for that? So that saves you time. Professional self-representation, we've talked about that before, is something that can be addressed here. Okay, what are other workplace skills that could be addressed if you wanted? Okay, and what can we make our students aware of? So after we come back, those are the questions. This is going to take about 12-15 minutes. Okay, and after we come back, I will ask one person to volunteer. Okay, I don't think we'll have time for every group to share, but I'll ask for someone. All right, any questions before we go to our rooms?
We're all set, Susanna. I'm going to create 3 different rooms if that works out.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so now I'm sharing my screen again with the questions that I wanted you to talk about. You don't need to go through all of them, but this was just to have a conversation about how you could use something, an authentic resource, to target some language structure at different levels, and what could you do with that? Okay. Do I have any volunteers who would like to share part of what they talked about, or any ideas that they think are relevant for the group?
Susanna, Dora raised her hand.
Okay, so Dora, go ahead.
I hope I'll be able. Anyway, I was happy to meet Manon, and you guess she's in France right now. So you see people joining from everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes. So we hope that we really understood the task. We chose the novice level. That's our lower level, and it's based on a presentational mode. And so their task was to create an Instagram, post. And they had to kind of, their posts will be based on talking about themselves, that they are basic information, because yeah, voila. And so in here, apart from, you know, the names, they have to talk about their likes and dislikes. The focus here is to insert also pictures that are not going to degrade their personalities, you know, because other people will be looking at their social media. Voila. And so other materials that could be used apart from the video, as Manon said here, Manon said we could have the student research other posts in French, you know, in the French language. They can use other magazines or articles, you know. Now, the part of the job here, which is professional self-representation, you know, that's the last but one bullet for the workplace skills. Now, if we are doing the presentational, it means that we'll not be able to do this bullet right now. It maybe might come later.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So that's a little bit what we could talk about.
Yeah, and thank you. And yeah, and actually, so what you are doing is actually presentational. By doing that, you're also focusing on personal brand, like through those images. Okay,
Yes.
You're creating an image of yourself that is public and that future employers will have access to or will request access to. And it's up to you whether you want to consent to that or not, but how can you control that a little bit? And I really like your activity, because I always thought that this would be more for more advanced learners that can discuss that already have, but the way you built it for novice students makes a lot of sense, and it's fun for them too. So thank you.
Thank you. Just to add a comment because of what you say. And you know, social media, some of them start in elementary. It's going to follow them. They will be adults, and that's with CBS. So it's really important for them to know.
Yes. And talking about how we can make our students more aware of this, in this particular case, social media is important for them. It's part of their social life, okay, in a way that it wasn't for us, at least not for me. So just talking about it, okay, just talking about it, they become aware and they say, oh, okay, they're doing this in the language classroom, but it's something that follows them. It's like, okay, be mindful of what you post, okay, and what you look like in those pictures, because it follows you, not just for your professional career, for other things. Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions before we move on to the next thing?
In our breakout room, we talked about having a class with people with different skill levels and abilities when they come in. And some have come from situations where their access to social media has been very restricted. And other people come in, like some of the Chinese students, with full technology, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, WeChat, and how to have many different levels and abilities within a class, how to teach that group.
Yeah, that is a challenge always. And I think one way could be to use it to our advantage and have the more proficient learners pair with the less proficient learners, so we don't have like less proficient together. And so we have that more advanced learner and also more technology proficient learner, right? If they know more about social media and not having those constraints as well. And also talking about cultural differences. I hadn't thought about that, but that's true. In different cultures, you know, young people are having different social media experiences. We typically think of social media as a youth culture thing, but it also can vary across countries and regions. Thank you. Are there any other comments before we move on? All right, I think we're good. So we're going to go in the next slide. I give you other topics that can help you contextualize language instruction. So for this particular, for the one on social media screening, the way I use it is for debates, okay? Part of the classroom creates arguments in favor and others create arguments against. My class in this case is more advanced. But here are other topics that spark conversation. For example, artificial intelligence and future careers. Okay, if you search for that and then video or infographic, or you're going to get a lot of material that you can use in your class to spark conversations and different types of activities. What jobs will not exist in 5, 10, or 20 years? Okay, that's another thing that all students can relate to. High schoolers, college students, even middle schoolers could relate to that. Okay, characteristics of effective leaders. Okay, and you could talk about across different industries, across different cultures, and you could do a lot with that. Okay, what does leader mean? Okay, it varies by context, right? Or why do some employers say college graduates are not workplace ready? Or why do some universities say that high schoolers are not college ready? So what is that? Okay, or can you turn a hobby into a career? Okay, yes, no, how? Would you like to? Or are certain jobs more glamorous? Okay, that's another topic that students like. So they get to talk about TV and media representation of jobs. Okay, is being a doctor as glamorous as some TV shows make you think, make them look like, right? Or inclusive language in the workplace. Okay, that's another one, and I'll show you an example of how I do that. That's another important skill, being inclusive in how we use our language and be mindful of how we can offend without really wanting to be offensive, okay, just by our word choices. So the next activity is a do-say chart, and this works very well to contextualize language instruction, and it's very good for novice learners. And it's about teaching the behavior and the language associated with a particular soft skill, okay? The example I'm gonna give you comes from a source that I have linked in the next slide, I think, and it's active listening, okay? So this skill, active listening, okay? So what I do here is I start by showing pictures of people listening and not listening to each other, just from Google, okay? And I use the pictures as I talk and ask questions like, is she listening? Is he a good listener? How can you tell? Are they listening to each other? Yes, no. And then I give commands to verify comprehension, and also learners could also give commands to each other, but mine are not at that stage. We do more one-word answers at that point. And then we complete a do-say chart as a class, but it could be done in pairs as well. This is the link where this is taken from. I've taken so many resources from ESL, okay? They have this figured out, okay? So to listen actively means, okay, you do this or you say this, okay? So that's the chart, do say chart, okay? So you do this, okay? Lean forward, nod, look at the speaker. Depending on the level and the maturity of your learners, okay, older learners will be able to make abstractions and imagine how that can be different across cultures, because the behavior after listening can also look different, okay? Or say this, okay? And this is in English, American English, but what is it in the target language, okay? What are the expressions that show that you are actively listening? For the more mature learners, I teach college, we get into conversations when I tell them, is interrupting or is ending another person's sentence showing active listening? Yes, no. Because actually, where I come from, it's not necessarily an interruption. You're not really interrupting the other person. You're showing that you are agreeing and you're thinking in the same way. You're listening. You are so connected to the other person that you can finish the sentence, right? You're not really interrupting. When in American English, at least in American conversational style, that could be perceived as a very offensive interruption, right? So we talk a little bit about conversation styles and how they can be different. Other soft skills that work well for do-say charts and for this type of cultural conversations: negotiation. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What are some of the words that you might use? Delegating. What does it look like? And what does it sound like, right? Conflict management, motivation, flexibility, time management, teamwork. And our students will probably have lots of experience, okay? I think in the US educational system, there's a lot of opportunities for teamwork from very early, okay? And that's also something that could be discussed, like cross-culturally, is it the same everywhere? So those are soft skills, okay? I want to finish, okay? I know we have about 10 minutes, so we will not do the next breakout room activity that I wanted to do, but I want to finish by talking to you about obtaining resources and other ideas, okay, to connect career education with existing curriculum. These are keyword searches that have worked for me, and they're listed here for you. So searching for career education in world languages curriculum, many resources published. ACTFL does have a lot of resources. Career education in ESL, as I said before, ESL is very well developed for this. Career preparation sites in educational government and government institutions, both in the US and the target language culture. These open resources, okay, as well. And then try to search, enter the search terms in the target language, and that's how you will get authentic resources, okay? I did that for gender inclusive language, okay? I didn't search for gender inclusive language in Spanish, okay? Because that would not give me the resources that I wanted, but I know how to say that in Spanish, and I know how to say that in French and in German, so I searched for those. Sorry. And I got to the UN, you have the links there. It's an authentic resource, okay? And they give you the same, okay, for the different languages. How do you do something more inclusive, okay? Forms of address, okay? Or for example, the feminine and the masculine pronouns, okay? How can you be more inclusive with that in the workplace? And then we look at, this is Spanish or French, okay? What is the equivalent in the French language for that, okay? What are you doing? And then students can do, in my case, they do an activity where they take a text and they try to make it more gender inclusive, okay? So that's a possibility. And the way that I searched for that, those resources was by using the target language term, okay, the terminology. So finishing now, okay, I will spend this time that I have talking, and we can talk as a larger group on how to connect career education with our curriculum when we are not so free to change things, okay? For example, in large programs, okay, I teach in a very large program, and we have multiple sections of the same course taught by different professors. We have a textbook which helps us with articulation through the levels, and it's a very good thing, but also doesn't leave much room, okay? But there may be some activities that you can do. So in the next, it says it's a task. We're not gonna do it in breakout rooms. I'll just do it with all of you. So this link takes you to this document. All right, where you have the typical first and second year curriculum topic, right? For all the languages, clothing, house, you probably have a unit on school activities, food and nutrition, technology, right? And then I give you some activities you could do. You're still covering clothing. You have that vocabulary or whatever grammar that goes with it. And you're doing an activity that targets career education at the same time. So for example, talking about what to wear and not to wear for a job interview. And then students need to design an infographic in pairs or in small groups, depending on your time and resources. And that could be the task. But you're addressing employability skills, creating an infographic, and then the topic, okay, what is professional, what is not. House, for example, that topic. An activity could be a role play where you have home buyers and realtors, and they need to practice active listening, okay, and professional etiquette during that role play. And those are professional activities. Or for school activities, they could create a Venn diagram, okay, where in one circle, they have the activities they do to be successful in school. In another part, they do the activities they do to be successful in a workplace. And then they see the commonalities. And these will be the first semester, like high frequency verbs, okay, that tend to be also the ones that you learn first, right? Arrive, work, prepare, okay, write, okay. For all the languages, we tend to teach those in the first year, right? Read, so those things in a Venn diagram, and they're just writing. For the unit on food and nutrition, they could create a school lunch, okay, menu, a school lunch menu for 1 full month. Okay, you can show them examples, okay, from your local schools or your high school, okay. And then they have to create that paying attention to nutrition guidelines and budget. Okay, so they're practicing that vocabulary in nutrition guidelines, but they're using an employability skill, teamwork, okay, and also budgeting, okay, in this case. Technology, using the job interview format that we saw before, and this could be for Geek Squad Repair Agent, okay, that could be the pretext, right, to use terminology related to technology. Sports and wellness unit, we discuss the role of sports and wellness in work-life balance. Okay, maybe they haven't thought about that, but they get to use those terms from the unit. For health, they could work collaboratively to write a job description for a school nurse position. Okay, for school nurse position, what would be the job description? And you're going to have a lot of health related vocabulary for that, okay, if they're doing that. And then for the family unit, we did this activity. I showed you this activity yesterday, business cards, okay? And then they're discussing the family name conventions in the target culture. Hobbies, okay, for the unit on hobbies, they could do the debate on that topic, okay? Can you turn a hobby into a career? Which hobbies are easier, okay, to profit from? And what are some advantages, disadvantages, okay? And they're using those hobbies, okay, the terminology. And then the activity that I was going to have you do, we're not doing that, but that could be like later on, you can think about it when you're teaching days, months, dates, right? What kind of activity could you do? Place and locations, holidays, or routines, okay? That's it for me, okay? Going back to the presentation, now the last few minutes, we can have some questions, comments, and then when we're done, this is a link to get feedback from you. Before we do that, we just have like 3 minutes, but are there any questions, comments, anything?
Dora has a question. Perhaps.
No, it's really just a comment. I like the last table that you just shared. You know, I think it would be nice to kind of integrate this in our teaching. You know, even if it's just like a project at the end or task. Because right now I was looking at the calendar and all that. Maybe the job career will be like design a planner. You know, showing you know, when you're gonna have a meeting, when you're gonna, so
I like that.
I think we can do that. Yeah, I like
and
that.
it's easier if you go through the topics that you cover,
Yes.
and then it's like, okay, I can do these one day. I can squeeze this in and do it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for all the very practical suggestions that you've given us.
Good.
That's a lot of food for thought there. Thank you.
Yeah,
I really loved it. I love how you also break down the fact that how we can apply it to various levels of proficiency. So thank you.
Good. yeah, it's a challenge when you're teaching multiple levels and you don't want to be thinking, you know, about different things. You want to do the same kind of activity, just apply it all over. So. Mhm.
A quick question.
Mhm.
So does this mean it doesn't matter what level you have, you, not me, you have where you're working, all your topics, all your units should be linked or should be aligned to career education? That's what you do?
No, what
Okay.
happens in my situation, I teach at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota, and there is some encouragement for faculty to integrate career education across the curriculum. So whatever you're teaching, if you can make a connection for students to see that they're doing, especially in the liberal arts, they're doing humanities, they're learning these academic subjects, but they have an applicability in their future professions. They're preparing them for their jobs. There's an encouragement for faculty to do that. And so I started doing that last year, and it's been very, very good for my classes. So in everything that I teach, I try to incorporate career readiness and tell students, you know, you're learning Spanish, yes, but you're also learning communication skills that are transferable and that you're going to use in professional settings. Here are the skills. You're doing this job interview and you're thinking about different ways. You're thinking about writing email, and that is not something just for the Spanish class. That has a real world application in other areas. So that's why I'm doing this, because there's an encouragement in my institution to do it. But once I started doing it, I realized that it's a very good way to motivate students. They're like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Okay, this helps. And I see that in student evaluations as well. And then I also do teach business Spanish. So that's specifically, you know, for students who are thinking about using Spanish professionally. So that's more, you know, like language for the professions. But I'm encouraging you to actually integrate it in what you're doing in your contest, even if your institution is not doing it, like it's not, you know, encouraging or helping or giving you resources for that, because it does help with motivation, especially for us students, and making it more relevant, and for students to want to continue learning the language, because they see that this is a communication class, really, and it's helping them become better at communicating and gaining those skills.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Because every time we teachers will always say interview. I mean, that's a cliche now, but I mean, this table really broadens it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was really interested in hearing how, what is the experience of people before they come to this class in social media. And so in our small group, we had a high schools as an example, and teaching people about using Twitter for the after school activities. Having people set up a Twitter for that particular, this would be like learning a skill for that particular activity. And then all the Twitters would also go to the teacher, faculty, and to the principal. So there would be a screening process about the announcements. And from that activity of doing it for their own classroom, different deadlines, different things, or for an after school activity like a club, they would gain experience about what actually was helpful and what was distracting. And yeah, it's like on the job experience. And then the other comment that I had was about the mixed ability groups. And this happens in the languages very commonly. And I think that it's very helpful just as a beginning to have a group activity where the topic is social media and what is all the elements of this, and then put them on the board so that you get all of the different types of social media out into the open and everybody can discuss, and nobody is identified as being proficient because they know 6 or 7 and the other person only knows 1 or 2 because they've come from a restricted background. And then after all of those types are out in the air and everybody is talking about what they are, what are the uses for each one? You know, gain the background from the people in the class as a whole.
Yeah, I like that. And then you're not singling people, it's just everybody gets that learning experience. I like that.
And then sometimes it's helpful to put people, at least at one point, to work with other people who've had a similar background and then come and bring a cultural perspective of that, like they may have come from a different middle school. Our high school brings together 4 middle schools, and sometimes that sort of camaraderie gives you a point of discussion between what people's backgrounds are. I don't know, to mix them up a little bit, but I think that if you take the high achieving people and you put them as with the low achieving, that is a setup for failure. I think that the high achieving person becomes very frustrated. And if the reason that the low achieving person is because of a cultural background or a restricted background, we have many people in rural areas and they don't have access to all of the technology. But in the high school, they all come together and everybody has their Chromebook, so through those 4 years, you bring them together. But
that's a very valid point. And it also brings us back to what I was talking about yesterday, that not everybody has had the same experiences. So if you get to talk about this in the classroom, when you get them, you're kind of leveling the field or contributing to, systematize that kind of education, and that everybody gets the chance at least to talk about those things and experience those things. Yeah, very good. Thank you for the comment.